Welcome back to the Guardian File. Make sure you hit that like and sub button. Let's get into it. This is another story about a female prison guard, female correctional officer, however you want to label them, having a sexual relationship with an inmate. Now, this is something that happens a little too often. To be real with you, it probably happens in every single jail or prison institution across the country. I always wondered, what are these dudes saying to these women to be able to convince them to basically put their life on the line, their freedom on the line, their money on the line, and just throw everything away? Because whether you want to view it this way or not, it has to be a gift to be able to talk someone or convince someone to do this. Because a lot comes along with it. Nothing positive comes along with it. You lose your job, you go to jail, and you have to most likely register as a sex offender because, again, there's no such thing as consensual sex, especially between an officer and an inmate in prison. So just to be clear, any type of sexual relationship between a prison guard, correctional officer, whether male or female, and an inmate will be labeled as a sexual assault. Sexual assault. So you'll be stuck with that label for the rest of your life. And a lot of times when we hear about these stories between the female officers and the inmates, I think we automatically have this picture of a woman who's unattractive, low self-esteem, etc. And normally that is the case, but it's not always like that. Sometimes it's some beautiful women that fall into that trap. But this story isn't about one of those women. This one, we're just going to say her name, Edwards. Now, this woman came in, it's obvious, she wasn't too confident in herself, wasn't very attractive, and you could just sense the low self-esteem coming through her pores. So, it was like blood and water to a shark. Dudes were lining up to basically see who was going to get to her first because, it's low-hanging fruit. They're not going to have to put too much work into it. And see, inmates know that as soon as they're able to get these officers to give in to something, small. For example, something small like bringing in a book, some food, piece of candy, anything that small. Once they do that, they have them hooked because that's against policy. They can be fired for that, can be arrested for that. A lot of bad things can happen just by doing something small like bringing in food or anything that, the average person would see as minor. So once they get them to do that, then, they're able to take it even further. You see, Officer Edwards, she never really dealt with too many of her co-workers. She would keep it cordial and speak, but as far as like conversing and mingling with the co-workers, she wouldn't really do that. She did a lot of overtime and always wanted to work in this specific unit. Even if she was assigned to somewhere else, she would find a way to make her way back to that unit. And even on her days off, would sign up for overtime and try to make sure she was in that specific unit. And some people, that's a red flag to some of us. Hey, but a lot of us really didn't think too much of it. See, Edwards went from, I guess you can describe her as a homely looking woman, to someone that started getting her hair done and nails done and wearing makeup. It's almost like you could sense confidence building up in her. So like I said, she enjoyed working this one specific unit. And it got to the point whereas when she wasn't able to work this unit, it became a major issue. It would get heated. And see, this is when people started realizing, okay, it's more than what it seems on the surface. This makes no sense for this one person who really hasn't even been working here this long to demand to be in this one specific unit. You know, working in a prison, you communicate with each other a lot over the radio, walkie-talkies. Obviously, we have phones also, but a lot of times communication is over the radio. We would try to get in contact with Officer Edwards over the radio, you know, many times throughout the day. And a lot of times she was nowhere to be found. Obviously, she would be somewhere in the housing unit, but no one could get in touch with her over the radio. And it would get to the point whereas someone would be sent to that unit, you know, to find her and get eyes on her to, you know, just to make sure she was okay. Because working in a prison, if you can't get in contact with an officer and you're calling them numerous times over the walkie-talkies or radios and they're not responding, you know, we tend to get, you know, there tends to be a lot of concern that comes with that. Because obviously the job can be dangerous. And, you know, being a female, you know, we try to protect our female officers as much as possible. You're locked up with a whole, 100 to 130 inmates to one officer in the dorm room. So, you know, that drew a lot of concern when we couldn't get in contact with them. So normally when we can't make contact with an officer over the radio or the phone, someone is sent to that unit to check on that officer. There's a few times someone's sent to the unit, officer is nowhere to be found. Obviously the officer is in the unit, but none of us can find her. Then all of a sudden, you know, she would pop up out of nowhere, you know, let us know that everything was okay. And, you know, even though it was weird that this was happening, the last thing you want to do is jump to conclusions and throw dirt on somebody's name and accuse them of doing something inappropriate when it could be something innocent. But the problem was that it happened very often. It started to become like on a daily basis. And like I said, this person would even come in on their days off, sign up for overtime to request working this specific unit. So things were starting to add up and it just wasn't looking good. Everybody was getting uncomfortable. So the more it happened, the more of a liability she became. So this is where investigations start. And normally investigations start, the first thing you're going to go to is the video cameras. So obviously in the prison, there's video cameras damn near everywhere. And the cameras would catch her going into inmate cells and being in the cells from 30 to 45 minutes at a time. It would come out whenever it was time for another controlled movement. Controlled movement, whereas inmates move from point A to point B. Whether they're going from the housing unit to the rec yard to the cafeteria, or rec yard to the chapel, you know, things like that. That would be the only time she came out. And then between those movements, she would be in inmate cells. And when inmates want privacy, they throw what they call a flap up. The flap is a towel or something that covers up the window so the inmate can have privacy, not just from other officers, but also from other inmates. So just imagine a female officer, going in the cell with one or two inmates that's occupying that cell, and that flap goes up, and they're in there from 30, 45 minutes to an hour. What do you think is going on? Oh, yeah, and I also forgot to mention that when it came to how she dealt with inmates, there's certain things that are considered appropriate, and there's certain things that are considered inappropriate. Now, obviously, when you're dealing with inmates, as a correctional officer or prison guard, you're supposed to deal with them in a professional manner. One thing that wouldn't be considered professional is hugging inmates. You're not even supposed to shake their hands. So just imagine what it looks like to see a female officer hugging an inmate. I just stated that for context purposes. Now back to the story. Yeah, she would be in the cells with these inmates for a long period of time. Period of time that will make anybody uncomfortable who's watching. So when they went further back in the videos, it would be that one cell, but there would also be other cells. And understand, no one can get in contact with this woman throughout these periods of time. Multiple cells throughout the whole day. There's an 8-hour shift. Let's say 7 of those hours was spent in different cells. See, what normally happens is that when an officer is doing something where a whole bunch of inmates can see, that one inmate that's directly benefiting from you that you're actually working with isn't the only one that knows what's going on. So when multiple inmates find out, now you have to keep multiple inmates quiet. And to keep them quiet, guess what? You most likely got to do what they ask or what they're demanding. And if you were, as a man, a male inmate in prison that doesn't have access to women, what would be one of the things that you're most likely going to demand? That's right. Sex. You're going to demand sex. And see, that's what was happening. It went from dealing with one inmate to the other inmates getting jealous and wanting a piece of the action also. Not only that, but inmates would come in from other units, and she was basically being pimped. So on a daily basis, like I said, not just 5 days out the week, 7 days out the week, she was coming in to work getting plowed by multiple inmates a day. And see, what happens is that, yeah, the inmates will have sex with you, but that's really not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to try to make money off you. And they can do that by getting you to bring contraband in. Contraband such as tobacco, drugs, any type of hard drugs. They have access to all of that in prison. And most likely it's coming to the prison through an officer. An officer that's getting caught up in a predicament like this. See, they picked up on a low self-esteem, the fact that she wasn't attractive. And you have a lot of con artists that's in prison. They have the gift of gab. There's some smart dudes in prison. Yeah, they did something stupid to get caught and got their freedom taken away. But they're far from stupid. So it's easy for them to manipulate a certain caliber of woman. Tell her what you want to hear. Something that they know she's not hearing on the outside. And make her feel good about herself. Get her to do one thing. Now they got her trapped. Now she has to do everything that they request of her, or risk getting reported, not only getting fired, but also losing their freedom. It's only a matter of time before it happens anyway. See, they'll use them for everything that they can possibly use them for. And then once they're no good to them, then the final thing that they can use them for is getting time cut off of their sentence. So, these inmates will have sex with this woman on a daily basis. Then once the main inmate had no more use for her, he reported her. Got 5 years knocked off his sentence. Was able to sue because it's technically sexual assault. Because again, technically and legally, there's no such thing as consensual sex in a prison, especially with someone who has authority over you, power over you, which a correctional officer or prison guard has over inmates technically. So even though we know that she wasn't forcing them to have sex, that's the only way it's going to be viewed legally when everything hits the fan. So to sum it all up, this woman was getting passed around on a daily basis. And it sounds crazy and it's disgusting, but probably taking about 20 different penises a day. Didn't benefit from it whatsoever. Didn't make any money off of nothing. This woman ended up, she was just, sounds crazy. She was married. Obviously, that didn't last. Can you imagine how embarrassing it is to have your wife having this done to her? Okay, yeah, I really feel for the man. But marriage over with. Freedom taken away. I believe she might have gotten 3 years. Now has to register as a sex offender. Lost a house, job, kids. And the last time I saw her, I actually came across her, she was working at McDonald's. I'm not lying, I'm not exaggerating. This is the honest to God truth. Now, whether she still works there, not now, I don't know. But this is a common thing in prison. Because you'll always have that one, maybe two women that, they're easy prey. So if you're a woman that knows that your self-esteem is low, be true to yourself. This job isn't for everybody, not for every man, especially isn't for every woman. You know whether you'll be able to fall victim to something like this, or you know that some women even go into this job wanting to do this because, it's guaranteed dick on a daily basis. And they're not really getting like that on the outside. So an inmate will make them feel like they're quote unquote beautiful dime pieces. Whereas generally society doesn't view them as that. So they can come in to their job on a daily basis, get their ego stroked, leave and feel good about themselves. But it never ends up in a positive way. It always backfires. Majority of the time, you're going to end up in jail. You're going to end up losing everything just because you didn't have confidence in yourself. And I don't place any of the blame in the inmates. Hell, they doing what they're supposed to do. If I was locked up, hell, I would be trying to get with one of the officers also. Either that, what other option do you have besides jacking off or going to the dark side and, doing that other stuff, which I don't even like to think about. But if I was an inmate, I'll be doing the same exact thing. So you go in with the mentality knowing that the goal is going to be to try to manipulate you in some way. And if you don't have the mentality to be able to make it past that, then you definitely don't need to be working in a prison. Because it's only a matter of time before you F up and lose everything that you've worked hard throughout your whole life to get. And for some odd reason, the inmates that are involved always end up getting time knocked off. So they won in a major way. They're getting sex and they're getting to go home early. Just because you don't have any confidence in yourself and your self-esteem is low. Make sure you hit the like and sub button. I'm out.